Hey, what's up, Raider Nation? Welcome back. Another special edition here of the Raiders NFL Draft Podcast alongside the former Raider, Bucky Brooks. I am Rhett Lewis. Excited, of course, for us to get a chance to chat now with first-year General Manager John Spytek. Of course, brings a championship pedigree to Las Vegas, and ultimately, that's what we're talking about doing here with the Raiders. And, John, thanks for giving us a few minutes of your time, man. I know a busy time of year. Can you give us a glimpse into what's happening right now inside the building with you guys as we sit here just over a week away?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks for having me on. Big fan of both of you guys, so appreciate the opportunity to come here and talk about the Raiders and where we're headed here. We've had a great couple weeks here as we roll forward towards the draft. We've spent a bunch of time today and last week with, the top 30 visit candidates, which we love to bring in and get to have some more in-depth conversations with than you're allowed at the Senior Bowl and the speed dating that happens at the Combine. So we've enjoyed it. We had a bunch of great kids and great players in here, and ultimately that's what we're looking to add to our franchise. And then once I get finished up with you guys, I got draft meetings until they let me go home. God knows what time that's going to be.
John, this process, when we get to it, like coaches, front office, everyone being on the same page, how do you ensure that everyone is in lockstep when you start making decisions on players, the type of players that you look for, but more importantly, the type of players that you bring into the organization?
Yeah, super important that there's a lot of communication between, the scouting department and the coaching staff at this time of year. I've got obviously a lot of experience in the draft, and the best players that we've picked throughout my 10 years at the different places I've been, usually everybody was in line with. Everybody was excited to get that player and that person into the building. And, where there's disagreement or there's some unrest or differing opinions on a player, often that's a good sign that maybe that's not the player for you. And the only way you're going to know that is if you communicate, up front, you have respectful conversations, you have direct conversations, and, people can feel kind of like they're in a safe space to lay it out there for you and be like, hey, listen, it's okay to say, I don't like this guy. He might just not be a good player for us, even if I like him. And, there's enough good players and people in every draft, and in this draft in particular, that we can be selective and we can be a little bit greedy with what we're at, and it's our job and it's our opportunity to find the best ones to bring to Raider Nation.
And I think you guys have talked so positively, John, whether it's you or Pete Carroll, about your holistic approach, right, to how you want to build this roster and build this team. And obviously the draft, a big part of that, whether it's the GM head coach relationship, whether that's getting the input from ownership and a player that you know so well in Tom Brady, having been teammates there in Michigan and obviously winning a title together in Tampa. I am kind of curious, though. Have you guys had any talks about what your draft grade of Brady would have been coming out and whether he'd have been 199 on the list? Just curious.
Plead the fifth on this. I had a boss tell me one time, you better know in life who can fire you. And, I was a young, dumb freshman trying to keep my head above water and mostly had my face mask buried in the dirt by Steve Hutchinson and Jeff Backus. So it was hard for me to see the throws and the movements when a Hall of Famer is burying you play after play. But what a great opportunity to reconnect with a former teammate. And the one thing I'll say about Tom is we share a love of Michigan, and that's kind of like the genesis, a lot of ways, of our football journey. And we share a lot of common thread and thought because we had that experience together. And it's also was hard to evaluate quarterbacks back in 1999 when everything was 22 personnel. It was power left and power right and ISO left and ISO right. And then if it was 3rd and 4, you might get a play action pass off of that. So it was not the drop back spread game like it is now.
No doubt. But look, and that's just one piece of your championship pedigree that we're talking about. Obviously, having been in Denver and been around Peyton Manning, too, you got a chance to kind of learn from two of the very best, or see, what it takes to be the best. Don't forget
John Elway was there too. So another one.
Great point. How does that kind of desire, right, that burning desire of those guys to be the very best at their position, how did that kind of influence the way you look at players, the way you evaluate players, and kind of looking for as close as you can find to those similar characteristics?
Yeah, massive influence in my career, starting in Denver, being around Peyton every day, but also getting to work with John every day and to see the way that he saw the game and his non-negotiables. And here's a guy that had obviously accomplished a ton in his professional playing career, and then his post-playing career professionally as well, and then he's back. And the competitive desire that John Elway had was that second to none that I'd ever been around at that point in my life. And then you put Peyton in that same building, and you see the way that Peyton prepares, how important it is to him, no stone unturned, just the game to Peyton, I felt like was played Monday through Saturday. Like that was the most important part, and Sunday became easy for him. And as a young scout, you should be trying to really like observe everything that's going on when you're around people like that. If you're serious about winning and getting to having to sit in seats like I'm sitting in right now. And so, I mean, what an opportunity. I mean, I was only there 3 short years, but we went to 2 Super Bowls, we won 1, and the thing that I'm left with is like, sure, they could throw a football, both those men, but it's about all the other stuff, the competitive desire, the will to do things that the common person and common player really isn't willing to do. And then you get the chance to have Tom come to Tampa, who, I had admired Tom for years, 1, because we had the connection to Michigan, but 2, because, I mean, there was nobody doing it better in the NFL during that time. And when you're a scout, and you know this, Bucky, like I just wanted to watch the best all the time. So, if I had a moment at any time at my stops in Philly or Cleveland or Denver, like, well, let's put on Tom Brady. I mean, there's worse things to do. And then you get him in the building and you're like, well, check that box too, just maybe almost to another level of psychotic competitiveness. And I mean that with the utmost respect to my boss. And it's just not an accident, and it's wildly shaped the way I view players and quarterbacks in particular.
John, one of the cool things for me was having the opportunity to play for the Raiders. I just remember when Mr. Davis was around, and you see all the signs around the building, commitment to excellence, pride and poise, and those things. Talk about the unique opportunity that you and Pete Carroll have to bring the franchise back to prominence, and how that shapes the way that you look at players and the players that will have an opportunity to wear the silver and black, because it is so special to so many people.
Yeah, it's a great responsibility, I think, that Coach and I both feel to be given this opportunity, and there's a lot of honor in it. There's a humility, I think, that comes with it. You realize that what an iconic franchise it is. I can see on the other side of my monitor right here the 3 Super Bowl trophies and the silver and black helmet, and between the moments of pinching yourself that you get a chance to work for an organization like this, there's a burning desire to give this fan base, this city, the wins that they deserve. And, I said it at my opening press conference, there's something better about the NFL when the Raiders were in the mix and on top of it. And our intention is to get this proud franchise back there and to do it as quickly as possible, but to do it right and to build the right foundation so it's sustainable as well.
And John, getting back to, like what you're going through right now with draft scenarios, right? Running through everything that could happen, or trying to figure out all that could happen, trying to get all the, the board in order at this point. We talk about it a lot, when we're talking about the draft, the idea of like perfect pairings. Obviously, you don't live in a perfect world when we get to Green Bay, right? But it is it's one of those things that's fun to think about. I'm curious how you guys kind of see it, whether that's, all right, let's judge the value of a player here at 1. And then when we come back around in the second, is it maybe a better value to take a player at that same position, that's maybe a little bit underneath the player we would have taken at 6, and kind of play those positional value games with early picks, first, second round, and trying to pair them and see what makes the most sense for your team?
Yeah, it's really a team building exercise is what you're looking for, right? I mean, it's certainly based some on need. Certainly it's based on the caliber of player that you're watching. And the ideal scenario is those 2 things match up, and then that's the perfect draft pick. But that very, very rarely happens. I think back to, to give a real life example of this, I think back to our first draft in Cleveland when I was there in 2010. It was a draft where we had conversations back and forth on Eric Berry and Joe Hayden and who the right pick was at that point, if they both were available. It turns out at 7, there was only one available. It was Joe Hayden, as Eric went 5th that year. But we had a safety in the second round that we really liked, that we really felt good about. So I think ultimately, while it was really close between Eric and Joe, we felt like the drop-off from corner at Joe in 1 to what we would get in the second round was a lot greater than the drop-off from Eric to a player named T.J. Ward. And that's ultimately probably what we would have ended up doing had we had to make the decision. We did not, because Eric got drafted by the Chiefs that year, and Joe was there waiting for us. But that's kind of a real-life example of what's the right order to do this in. And it's got a lot to do with your needs as an organization, but also the players that you can kind of project might still be available at your later picks. And there's no crystal ball there either. I mean, you're using instinct and gut feeling and as many different models and resources as you can, but it ultimately kind of comes down to like instinct, and is this the best way to build the team?
John, I'm curious. How beneficial is it to have a head coach that has won a Super Bowl, that's had a level of success in the league? You come from a successful background. How do you guys merge that vision as you talk about putting the team together, whether it's the draft or just in free agency or just how the team operates?
Pete's a wonderful resource for me right now. I mean, it really everywhere he's been successful, and there's a calming factor when you have the job that I have. Is like I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. Not that it's my responsibility anyway, but like coach has got that. The program's going to be run the right way. The message to the players, which is critically important as we get started and onboard kind of everybody, and really his ability to speak to the entire organization and energize an organization is, I marvel at it every day, and that's not kind of where I see myself. I like standing in the back of the room and listening to him kind of hype everybody up. I mean, I feel like when that's happening, everyone's kind of where they should be. And so, he's a great resource that way, but, just the bouncing ideas off of each other and, just think about this, what's your experience tell you about this? And, at the end of the day, like we both are team first guys. We talk about in our building every day about the value of being a great teammate. And I've always prided myself in that. I know Coach has too. And so our goal is the same, is to make the best decisions possible for the Raiders. And whether that's a free agent player, a draft pick, an undrafted free agent player, we're coming from it the same way.
We talked a little bit about your influences. John, talk about the quarterbacks, talk about John Elway, but obviously you come, from Tampa most recently, where Bucky and I talked about it a bunch on this podcast series this year, the success you guys had there in building an offensive line. It almost felt like twice. And then, in doing that through the draft with some big time picks, and then kind of mimicking that on the defensive front as well. And that attention to detail in the trenches with some of those guys. Like, is that one of the things that you'll take with you, that you have taken with you from your time in Tampa when you're judging success in the draft and building through the draft?
Yeah, I have a deep belief in the physicality and the violence required to play football, and it starts with the big boys up front, and that again, I think you can trace that back to my playing days at Michigan too. Like that's how we were built in those years, and it's kind of who I am to my core, and we were very intentional with it in Tampa, and the results I think speak for themselves. Like to your point, Rhett, like we had a great O-line the year we won the Super Bowl. And last year we had a great O-line again, and the only player common on both of them was Tristan Wirfs. And he's a great one, but it's not just about Tristan. It's about those other four men up front with him too. And there's no better way to me than to do it through the draft. Those guys they're hard to find in free agency. And if you find them, you either got really lucky, like we did with Ryan Jensen, or you probably overpaid for somebody. And to me, that's just the reality of how O-line and D-line work.
And then, and we'll get you out of here on this, John. We sure do appreciate your time at a busy time. But, along those same lines and learning lessons from prior drafts, and I love that insight that you gave into, some of the decision-making process when you're deciding between players. When you go back and study, drafts, once you get some time here, like, are there common threads that you find with hits and misses in terms of success with your team, the team that drafted a player?
Yeah, it's about the person. Usually we miss on the person, which is a harder thing to grab because it's not tangible. You can't see it. I have a love affair with watching players move and compete and hit and tackle and block and all those things. Those things are much more tangible. I mean, I can put it on and my two sons can see who's fast and who can catch and who can throw and all that. But it's harder to gauge the person. And I'm in my second season now in the NFL, and I've spent a lot of time interviewing players and getting to know them and getting a confidence to the way they answer questions, whether or not they're the right fit for your organization. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do. We're trying to find the best people for the Raiders. And we tell our scouts all the time, don't worry about if guys go other places and are successful or not. We're just looking to find the best fit for the Raiders. And it very usually is the person that leads the way with that. The competitiveness, the passion, the resiliency, the confidence, all those things they bring to the table. And then, they better be able to run and catch and throw too, because that's really important as well.
Yeah, that's certainly a piece of it. But I think it's a great point you make about, evaluating the entire player, and that includes the person and the background part of it as well. And can't wait to see who you guys fill out there. If you want to, send us any hints on 6 overall, let us know. We're open for business here, but we appreciate you, man. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, no comment on that. I gotta get my mind right and tell the right people first. So no offense to you guys.
No, hey, none taken.
Okay.
None taken.
Good try, though.
None taken, but we're with you, man. Thanks, John. We appreciate you, man. Thanks for being here with us. And thanks to all of you here in Raider Nation for being a part of another episode of the Raiders NFL Draft Podcast. Looking forward to being back here with you for another preview of the Raiders Draft next week.